Welcome to another episode of the Speaking of Writers podcast. I'm Steve Richards. My guest today is Gregory Poirier, an acclaimed screenwriter, director, and producer whose work includes National Treasure, Book of Secrets, Knox Goes Away, and the hit television series Rosewood. Now Gregory brings his cinematic storytelling talents to the page with his debut novel, 1,000 Cuts, the first of what will hopefully be many Max Starkey thrillers. Set against the dangerous backdrop of Bangkok and the jungles of Southeast Asia, the novel follows former CIA operative Max Starkey as he's pulled back into a deadly world of betrayal, political violence, shifting loyalties, and buried secrets. Critics are already calling it a gripping blend of emotional depth and explosive action. I'm happy to have Gregory Poirier join me here for the first time on the Speaking of Writers podcast. Welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great
Thank
to
you for
have you
making
here.
time for me.
So you have spent years writing for film and television. So what sparked the decision to finally write your first novel here?
Well, it's interesting. Actually, the story kind of did it for me. As I'm sure a lot of writers can identify with, it wasn't really my choice. The thing sort of chose itself. I had this idea, and I wanted to write. My intention was to sort of write the movie that Robert Mitchum or Humphrey Bogart would make if he were alive now. You
Yeah.
know, there's something with a modern sensibility, modern action, and but with that kind of a noirish character and a noirish way into it. The setup in this book is very noirish. Um, and I started it as a screenplay, and I just couldn't make it work. It wasn't working, and I was getting frustrated, and I couldn't figure out why. And I was having a lunch with a friend of mine, a guy named Andrew Marlowe, and totally unrelated to this, he said, I keep waiting for you to write a novel. I think you could be a very good novelist. And I just kind of went home with that germ in my head and thought, maybe that's why this isn't working. Maybe it's supposed to be something else. And so I sat down and started writing it, and here we are.
Did writing fiction feel liberating compared to screenwriting because you weren't limited by runtime, by budgets?
Yeah, I mean, it's liberating in a lot of ways, but in a lot of ways, and this is going to sound strange to people who haven't done it, but in a lot of ways, the structure of screenplays is liberating in itself
Mm.
because you sort of have a sense of certain things that you need to service. And that, one of the challenges that I really like about writing movies is finding ways to reveal character and reveal, background and reveal emotion without being able to go inside the person's head. I mean, a screenplay is a 100% external thing. There's no, he feels this way, he feels that way. She longs for this. You can't do any of that. All you can put down on the page is what the audience sees and what the audience hears. So you have to find really creative ways to bring all that stuff out. And I've spent, 35 years of my life doing that, and now all of a sudden it's complete opposite. And so yeah, it was liberating in the sense of, wow, I can just say what they're actually thinking. It's a very strange thing. I told my wife it was felt like I'd been a electrician for 35 years, and then I took all the tools that I had amassed over the years of being an electrician and tried to do some plumbing,
Mm.
you know and so I had to get a whole new set of tools. I had to reteach myself a lot of things, but it was really a lot of fun. I enjoyed it.
Did you always know that you were a pretty good storyteller from a young age?
Yes. Well, I don't know if I knew that I was a good storyteller, but I knew that I was a storyteller.
Mm.
I mean, I used to make up stories all the time when I was a kid, and I actually wrote some plays that we performed in my high school theater, and so I sort of had it in my blood. For some reason, it was just sort of inherently there. The trick was to hone it and to find some discipline for it, which was, you know, the difficult part. I mean, I think making up stories is one thing, but actually being able to tell them in a compelling way is something you have to work to develop. It's um it's
Matt,
difficult.
yeah. Max Starkey's a great name for a character, by the way. Such a layered protagonist, damaged, morally gray, but still deeply human, too. Where did that character first come from for you?
Well, again, it was just sort of, I'm a huge movie freak. I mean, obviously my career's been in movies, but it's also sort of my avocation. Like I keep the Turner Classic Movie Channel on in the background all day long, every day.
Hmm.
I just love it, and I'm particularly fond of noirs. And I recently just went through a just sort of a few month period where I watched every Humphrey Bogart movie I could find, and anything that came on that was slightly noirish, I watched. And the character just sort of came out of that. I had this idea of someone who had been in the CIA and was now out and gets pulled back into something, but I didn't want it to be he gets pulled back into saving the world from the Russians or, whatever. I wanted it to be something more interesting than that. I mean, I guess that's interesting, but that just wasn't where I wanted to go. And so it sort of lent itself to this noir character of this guy, but he's got a lot of he's got a lot of skills, and he's working now doing illegal things because it's the only thing he could figure out to do with the skills that he has after he left the agency. And he's got pain and he's got darkness in him, but at the heart of it, like all of those characters in those movies, he's the guy that in the end is going to do the decent thing, right? He's got a moral center. And that just is a fascinating type of character to me. And then, the character building comes on what are those things? Why is he this way? Why does he have this sense of moral right and wrong when people around him don't? How was he brought up? How was he taught? what what's driving him, and that sort of he also has, as you know, if you read the book, he's got a great giant betrayal in his past that he's trying to overcome in the course of this story. So I just found him to be a really fun, interesting character, and he the way that he's set up, I think there are a lot of adventures he can go on, you know.
Yeah.
So
One of the strengths of this novel, Gregory, is no surprise here, how cinematic it feels. Did you visualize scenes the same way you would when writing a screenplay?
yes, well, yes and no, because again, it's this sort of external internal thing, and when you're, the action sequences, I think, are the writing of the action sequences is very similar. They're just a little bit more filled out in the book, but it's the character stuff that I think is really seen from the inside as opposed from the outside. And that's but that's very cinematic too, I think. The good I've always felt that the best action movies are the ones that have something really personal at stake, as opposed to just there's a bomb somewhere, we got to find it, and that's what the whole story is. If there's a bomb somewhere and you've got to find it, but it's the Hurt Locker and the guy's got all these emotional things going on that he's got to deal with, then that's a good movie. So that's kind of how that came about. But yeah, I would expect it to feel kind of cinematic because I've been writing cinema for a long time. And I did go through a period where I was sort of the go-to action guy for rewrites and stuff like that. So I've written a lot of action for the page, you know. Um, I've also written too much action for the page. I was lucky enough to do a movie with Jackie Chan one time, and I realized about halfway through the process that what I should have written was they're in a Benihana, there's hot tables and there's knives and they fight. And that's all I would have to write because Jackie and his guys were going to figure the rest out and do what they wanted to do anyway.
Yeah.
So it's all different. Every piece of writing is different, and the demands on every piece of writing are different, I think. But I do have a good imagination for action, and that's
Mhm.
all action sequences are: is somebody sitting there imagining something happening, and you try to be logical about it, and you try to go in a progression that makes sense. But in the end, it's just imagination.
Let's talk about setting in A Thousand Cuts. Bangkok and the rainforest almost became characters themselves in the story. Why were those settings so important for this novel?
Well, there's a number of reasons. The first most obvious reason is that what they're trying to do, and I don't think we're giving too much away if we say they're trying to move a large physical amount of gold out of this country without being seen or caught. And so that journey had to be perilous. So you're either looking at alpine mountains or you're looking at desert or you're looking at jungle. You want to find an extreme place to set it. And I just decided that the jungle was the most interesting way to do it and had the most interesting obstacles in it. And on top of that, I have traveled in that part of the world quite a bit. I've traveled a lot of places, but I've been there. And so I kind of knew the area and had a sense of how things feel and what it's like when it's raining in the jungle and the giant spiders you might see and all that kind of stuff. So,
Well, you said you've been there, I guess, many times. How much research went into building the political tension, the underworld, and espionage elements of this book?
well, what I love about the underworld stuff is, again, you can completely make that up because we've all seen a million movies about the underworld. We've all read a million books about the underworld. So you just try to find an interesting way into it. And I thought that this idea of him being what I'm calling a recovery man, where if someone steals from the mob or whatever, he goes and gets the thing back, gets the money back or whatever it is. That's his job. It's felt like a good use of his skills, but also a way into that world that we haven't really seen before, you
Mm.
know, because that's always what you're striving to do is to take the familiar and make it different enough that it stands out. The political stuff, you've read the book, so you know that I actually, even though it takes place in Southeast Asia, I set it in a fictional country. And there was a lot of reasons for that. I knew sort of where I wanted it to be in a Golden Triangle area, but you know, I I thought about each real country down there and came up against something in each one. For example, in Thailand, they have a monarchy down there that they revere. And so in order to do this thing with this dictator, I would have to pretend like that didn't exist, which felt wonky to me. Laos is run by a very controlling and tight communist government. Myanmar, at the time that I was writing this, and still was, embroiled in a genocide of the Rohingyas and everything else going on there, a civil war. And it just felt like to sort of set this romp heist movie there would sort of be diminishing what was really happening there. So after sort of looking at every real place, I just decided, oh, there can be another small country in the middle of all that, you know. And I do refer to it as the smallest nation in Asia.
Yeah.
It's sort of the Luxembourg of Asia, I guess. But that was a conscious decision to avoid real politics and just, do the politics that I wanted to do. So
LeVar Burton called you, quote, a master storyteller and said he'd follow Max Starkey anywhere. What did it mean to receive that kind of praise from him?
Oh, that wasn't just unbelievable. It was amazing. I mean, obviously, I revere him as everyone else does. Um, he was my first reader. I don't know if you read the
Yeah.
acknowledgments in the back of the
Yep.
book, but he's a very dear friend, and he was the first person I gave the book to and said, "Is this anything?" And his reaction was through the roof. So that really meant a lot to me. He's an amazing man, and knowing him has been one of the great privileges of my life. And getting a response like that and a quote like that was certainly a highlight.
Yeah, that had to be. As this is the start of of a series, right?
Hopefully, yes.
How much of Max Starkey's larger journey do you already see mapped out? I've heard somewhere you have the second one written already, right?
I do. Where'd you hear that? I'm curious.
I heard that on another podcast, I believe.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. um, I would never do another podcast. Come on. No, I, yeah, I already have the second one written. I mean, I'm sure I'll do a lot more work on it, and especially once the editors read it. Apparently it's not going to come out until next April, so we have a lot of time to to play with it. But I took this one. I won't tell you much about it, but I will tell you that it's again rooted in something very personal for him. And this one takes place in North Africa. It takes place in Egypt mostly.
All right, so
So
another one coming, but bigger question here. Can we expect Max Starkey on the big screen?
uh, there's something cooking. I'm not allowed to give too many details, but there is something cooking. I, however, will not write it. I made the decision early on that if I sold the rights, I would not offer my services. I'd let them find somebody else. But I think it's not going to be on the big screen. I think it's going to be a streaming series. So
All right,
with any luck.
yeah, a lot more to come from
I mean,
Max Starkey.
there are people that want to make it, but we're a long way from that.
Yeah.
You know how Hollywood is.
Yes. For aspiring writers watching and listening to this podcast, especially screenwriters hoping to move into novels, what lessons did you learn during this transition?
Well, one of the things that I learned was that it's in many ways the finished product is more of what you envision than it ever will be in a film because the once you've written a book, there's your book. That's the book. People are going to like the book or they're not going to like the book. Once you've written your screenplay, that's the beginning of a long process of a lot of people doing a lot of things to your screenplay, you know, and hopefully you will like the finished product, but there's no guarantee of that. So I just really enjoyed that feeling that, oh, I'm talking directly to my reader, which is something that I've never had in my career, because there's always so many layers between me and the final viewer. So I really appreciated that. I would say transitioning from screenplays to books, my biggest challenge was the verbiage. At the beginning of working on this, I tended to just overwrite everything because I suddenly had this freedom to go into my characters' minds and to describe scenes and just all this stuff. And I wound up going back and saying, okay, I need to be a little more. Luckily, I was working in this sort of noir structure, which lends itself to terse, you know, punctuated
Yes.
writing. But I still was doing too much, writing too much. So that would be the sort of warning that I would give to people making that transition.
And Gregory, when you
Yeah.
look back at your career from a Hollywood screenwriter to debut novelist now, what has writing taught you about yourself?
Oh man, um, it has taught me that I lack self-discipline. I'm one of those people that has to. I have to have a really structured schedule because otherwise I'll never write. You know, it has taught me that I am a good storyteller and that I think I have the ability to move people when I do it well. Um, I've done some schlocky movies, but I've also done movies that I'm extremely proud of where I know the audience was moved by them and felt what I was intending for them to feel. Um, so I think maybe the lesson is I'm not as shallow as I think I am.
Mm. All right, we're going to wrap up with some fun rapid fire questions here. First thing that comes to mind when I throw these
Okay.
questions out to you. What's harder to write, dialogue or action?
Action for
Okay.
me. Dialogue has always been something that comes to me easily.
Favorite espionage novel of all time?
Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. Did I get
One
those in the right order? think I think I did.
one movie that inspired your storytelling style.
Okay, this is going to sound so stupid, but Planet of the Apes,
Mm.
the original one,
I didn't think you were going to say that.
and also
Coffee.
Live and Let Die.
Okay. Coffee shop writing or quiet office writing?
Coffee shop.
Mm.
I love working in busy, loud places.
All right, character you'd most like to spend a day with, Max Starkey or Benjamin Gates from National Treasure?
Benjamin Gates. Max spending a day with Max Starkey scares the crap out of me. A lot of violent things happen around that man.
Favorite movie of all time?
Oh God, I can't answer that question. I'll say The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance.
Oh, great one.
Yeah,
And give me one word to describe Max Starkey.
tough.
He's Gregory Poirier. His debut thriller is A Thousand Cuts, a Max Starkey thriller. It is gripping, cinematic story filled with espionage, betrayal, emotional depth, and unforgettable action. And it introduces readers to a compelling new hero in Max Starkey. And there's more to come from Max Starkey and Gregory, too. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. And don't forget to subscribe to the Speaking of Writers podcast on Spotify, YouTube, Apple, and wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Steve Richards. Thank you for watching and for listening. I'll talk to you again next time.